Hi, I'm Annabelle Trades, and this is Isaac. Today we are jumping in super deeply into the electrical issues with my 1953 Chevy pickup truck. Hopefully we can get them all solved so that we can move on and get to the fun stuff, which is the mechanical stuff. Before we get started, I would love to give a huge shout out to Workman's Friend for sponsoring this portion of the truck rebuild. Let's get started.
I get my hands dirty, they show me no mercy, so I just keep working.
First and foremost with this truck restoration is that Isaac keeps hitting his head on this, so there we go.
Yes.
Be careful.
It's so
Watch
safe.
yourself. So taking a look underneath the hood of this truck, it actually became pretty quickly and readily apparent that someone had started a 12-volt conversion on this truck and just either didn't finish it or basically probably more likely made it look like it was done so that when we were testing out the truck, we could look and everything appeared right, and in fact it wasn't right. So what we have here, as we looked more closely, is, you know, some junkyard writing. This here is a 12-volt generator, but I'm honestly, in taking a closer look at it, I don't think it's the right one for this truck. It obviously was from a junkyard, and it wasn't even hooked up properly, even if it was the right one. So we're gonna have to take this generator off, and since we're going to that trouble anyway, we're going to go ahead right now and make a 12-volt conversion. These are old cars, and people have, you know, it's been repaired and owned by many different people, so no one's really to blame. It's just things were done improperly, so we now need to fix them. Another thing about this 12-volt conversion that someone had tried is that this voltage regulator is not right for a 12-volt generator. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna trace back all of this wiring and just find out what needs to be in here, get rid of what doesn't need to be here, because here's another thing that we just found too. Over here there was at some point some kind of attachment, a winch or some other secondary piece of equipment, and this wire was ground out, on here and was grounded out on the frame of the vehicle. So that in and of itself is creating a battery draw, so we're gonna go ahead and get rid of that. We'll take off all the battery draws, we'll retrace all the wires and make sure that things are where they need to be. Okay, Isaac, this is actually a really fascinating product. It is a skin barrier cream, so you know that if you put something on your skin, it will enter your bloodstream in 3 seconds, right? This is a skin barrier. You put it on like lotion, and your hands are already filthy somehow, even though you haven't actually done anything, but I mean, not a call out, everything's fine. Anyway, you put this on, and it literally is basically like liquid gloves. So we're about to get super greasy in here, but because of this product, we'll also then be able to just wash it off without any harmful chemicals. We're not going to lose a bunch of skin. I mean, once again,
it's already gone. There's
nothing left. But for me, I get to keep my skin looking like farmer fresh. It's probably as best as it can ever get. Anyway, this is a fantastic product. Whether you're in the garden or working on super greasy jobs like inside the truck, it will keep your skin protected, moisturized, and nice and clean. All right, so let's get some wrenches, get our hands dirty. All right, so first things first, we've got to get this old generator off of here. It's funny when I think my hands are too big. One nice thing about these old trucks, though, is that they've got such nice engine compartments. Nice big ones. Whoops.
There it goes. It's off.
It's off. All right. So for those of you that don't know, this is generator, and back in the day, this piece was attached to the fan on the engine, and basically it spinning recharged the battery. So the battery is what initially ignites the spark to get the car started, but then this thing will run and it'll recharge the battery. That's why the battery doesn't just, you know, take 100 sparks and then die. So the reason why we were having problems with the truck, basically we got it onto the trailer, we drove it back, and then we drove it a little while and then it was done, is because they had put a deep cycle battery, which is something that can, you know, take a few more starts and run for a little while longer than a traditional car battery. So what was happening is that when that deep cell battery died completely, we put a new battery in, but there was nothing charging it because this thing wasn't working properly because it wasn't hooked up properly. So we're getting rid of this guy, and we are going to finish out the 12 volt conversion and put in, instead of a generator, an alternator. Isaac, can you tell us a little bit about the difference between an alternator and a generator?
So it's a two-part system that are separate and they perform different functions. You have simply the generation of the electricity, and then you have the regulation of the electricity separate. The alternator is going to do all of that in and of itself, and if it's properly wired and properly grounded, it's going to take care of all that this multi-part system was doing.
All right, let's put it on. All right, so that means that we could just completely get rid of this. Oh, well, there really wasn't that much securing it on here to begin with, so here we go. All right, so first things first, we basically need to start unwrapping these wires and seeing what goes where, and just tracing it all back. This is a very long and laborious process that certainly electronics, first of all, electronics are really my weak point. I don't understand how electronics work very well, and so I'm really excited to get past this part and get to the mechanical part, which is the really fun thing. Because the one nice thing about these old cars, is that they don't have very big electrical systems, so it is possible for someone like me to figure it out. But what I really like about engines and mechanical things is that you can usually physically see what's wrong and then fix it. Whereas electronics are not quite as cut and dry. Okay, so we're gonna trace these wire backs and we're gonna basically just figure out what each and every one of them does. So first things first, this is a nice big one. Isaac, are you down there?
Yes.
Okay, so coming into the instrument panel, what is this big, like the thick red wire? What does this one do?
It's going into the instrument cluster in a couple of different places. It's fastened onto one of the light bars.
So are we thinking that it's lights or something?
Yeah, this is probably going to be some of your intermittent connections, some of your things like lights, and if you had any type of air conditioning or anything like that you could switch on and off, things that would be on a switch.
Okay, so how about, since the ignition is the thing that we've been having the most problems with, can you see if you can locate the ignition wires and wiggle those so we can trace those back?
We actually, one of the wires coming off of this big red wire is one of the ones going over to the ignition switch.
Okay.
We are going to want to look up there and make sure all the connections with this red wire are nice and secure.
Okay, Isaac, it looks like on the second post in there that there needs to be a positive line that's going to go down to the generator. That doesn't even exist right now, so let's make that up, because we're going to need that to run down to the alternator anyway.
It's going to hold things tight and just kind of give this a little more strength up here. Oh yeah.
Y'all spin.
That gun is putting off 1,000 degrees.
That's insane.
Isn't that wild?
All right. Hot!
Ooh, hey. It's 1,000 degrees. Do you remember the part where that gun is 1,000 degrees?
Yeah, same away. All right, so here's that lead wire that we just made. We're gonna just stick them onto the second post here, attach them, then we'll have it ready to attach to the alternator when we put that in. There we go. So this is a low amperage alternator, and it will take the place of the generator. So basically we're just going to get it in there and mount it up, hook it onto the belt, get it hooked in, and see if it actually charges the battery. Just really quickly, the thing about this is that on the generator hung a little bit lower, and so the belt that was in there, if we were to use this same belt, I think it would just slip really badly. So where you see this fan, this has a pulley on it, and if this pulley is not actually spinning the alternator or the generator, then obviously nothing's charging. And so because this doesn't have very much purchase here, we're gonna switch out for a smaller belt. And mainly that's just because this alternator is a little bit different size than the generator that was in here before. All right, so this is a little bit smaller belt. We're gonna put it on in there, get it on all of the relevant pulleys, etc., and lift up the alternator so that we can stretch it on there. Now, get it to drop down in there. The only thing, we just gotta watch that it's not touching the fender wall here, but we should be good, yeah?
Are you able to get to the end of that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. All right, so that's tight at the bottom of the arm. The belt's nice and tight here. all we need to do now is connect this lead wire, and we are gonna, we have a few more things to do in the ignition box, but other than that, we're good. All right, let's get this ignition situation sorted. All right, we're gonna save you a whole lot of jibber-jabbering and wire pulling. Basically, it turned out that we had a whole cluster of wires right here that were A, shot, and B, too short to work with. So we went through and did that exact same process we showed you, making the positive lead for the alternator, and re-pulled all these wires for the ignition. We wired in a new ignition switch and ran everything back to the battery. The battery's still unhooked, don't you worry. But now we've got everything to the point that if we've got the electrical issues sorted, which I think we do, we can hook the battery back up and see if she's gonna start. Okay, so literally all we need to do now is just hook this guy up. Tighten that guy on, and thankfully we still have the quick connect valve, which I don't think we actually need anymore, but we've got it, so that's on. All right, let's see if this works. All right, so the proof really here is in the pudding. Let's just see if this actually works. Unreal. Woo! Okay, a quick wrap up about what we did to get the truck from where it has been in all of my previous content to right now is that when I purchased this truck, it had the beginnings of a 12-volt conversion, but it was basically, we'll just believe the best and say that someone just hadn't finished their project. However, it was hooked up in such a way that led me to believe that it had already been completed. So in my last video on this truck project, we talked about switching out the battery, changing all those battery cables, and our intention after that whole project didn't work was to come back and add a whole new wiring harness. Instead of doing that, we were able to trace back the connections. We finished the 12-volt conversions, and instead of using a generator, we just went all the way over to an alternator. And now we have a system that charges the battery, an ignition system that works, and we after hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of tracing wires and connections, we now have a fully functional wiring system, so that now the truck is in such a state that we can start diagnosing all the mechanical issues, and that's what's coming next. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video and for supporting my channel in that way. If you'd like to support it in other ways, you can find a link for my Patreon. You can also click the link below to find some Ann of All Trades merchandise. I hope you leave this video feeling challenged, inspired, and excited to get outside and to do things with your own hands as well. Cheers.